It's time to change things up in this Roll for Crit preview as we take a look at Mercurial. In this game, you are all mages who have traveled to new land with strange energy where you can see the elements shift from fire to earth to lightning. And of course, as aspiring mages, you want to show off, show your heroic acts, gain some prestige, and truly show your prowess.
This is what the game will look like when it's all set up. You're going to have 3 rows of 6 cards. There are 3 different types of cards in this game: heroics, alterations, and spells. You'll be able to gain those in various ways throughout the game. Each player is going to have their own personal mage board. They will have a unique mage setup, which will have a little bit different starting cards, as well as a slightly different special power here to convert resources later on. But for the most part, they will all play in the same way. You'll also have this set of 6 dice. Each die has 6 different element symbols on it. At the start of the round, everybody's going to roll all their dice. You'll be able to use those to get cards. And there's a couple other resources to note: mana and acuity. You'll start with some of that, and you'll be able to get more of it later on as well. Also will be useful for purchasing cards later. Now, on your turn, there are 2 primary things that you can choose to do. The first one that I will talk about is take and play. That's one combined action that you can do. It involves taking probably a card from the table, could also be one of these acuity pieces to put on your board, and playing one card from your hand. Playing a card simply involves you putting the card on the table in front of you and carrying out its effects as indicated in the top corner over here. A lot of times you will see this symbol, which means that you get to take whatever resources indicated there, in this case 3 acuity. This here has 3 other people on it. That means that everybody else also gets to take an acuity when that card is played. So some cards will have little after effects like that. Some cards will allow you to convert your dice to other symbols. So if you weren't happy with what you rolled, you could take one and you could exchange it to another side, as long as you can spend the indicated resources that the card requires you to do when you play it. Some cards, like artifacts, also have alternate conditions over here, alternate options for you on the turn. If you don't like, or for whatever reason you're unable to carry out the main action, you can do this secondary, usually pretty lesser effect. Maybe it will let you reroll some of your dice or just get a little extra resource or something like that. So that's how playing works. Now you can play or take in either order on your turn. I feel like usually you might be taking first, and then you can even play the card that you just took, but it really depends on your situation. Now, as far as taking goes, you can first take back any cards you have played previously. That's one option, because once you have played a card, it stays out in front of you. You can't use it again. But again, if you decide to, you can on your turn take all the cards that you've already played back into your hand, and they will be ready for use once more. Or you can take a brand new card from one of the bottom 2 rows, alterations or spells. Taking an alteration card, these act just like the cards you start with in your hand that I explained already. They are free. They don't cost anything. However, if you take one beyond this first card here, you do have to place 1 acuity on it in order to buy one of the other ones. It will refill from the top of the deck, and the cards will actually slide over if you take one from the middle. And if anybody chooses to take this card later, they will get all the acuity that's on it as a bonus. Then there are the spells at the bottom. Those do have a cost in dice symbols. You'll see each one is indicated with a different element symbol that you'll find on your dice, and you need to be able to cover them all with the indicated symbol. However, some of them have an option. Instead of placing a die there, you can spend 2 of your mana to substitute. So this is a useful thing to have if you're not sure if you're going to be able to get all the symbols that you need for that round. And even if you don't have enough mana, you can also substitute acuity for mana. 1 of these blue ones will equal 2 of these white ones. So there's a whole system, a whole hierarchy there where you can figure out which resources you're able to get in order to acquire one of those spells down at the bottom. There's also a discount on the first 2 you can see. That first one will cost you 1 fewer mana to purchase. The second one will cost you 1 fewer acuity. So if you're short on one of those, that's maybe a nice place to go. Once you have some of those spells, then you're going to be able to move on to the second action that you can take on your turn.
That's right. On your turn, you're probably going to be doing the taking and playing in some order until you have enough spells gathered to do casting. When you take these spells, they don't go to your hand. They're sort of set up. It's like you're prepping the spells. And when you take the casting action, you're going to cast all your spells at once in order to try to prove your heroic feats. Now, I have some spells put out here as if we had them ready to go. Usually there will be dice on top of them, because when you buy a spell with dice or your mana crystals, they stay on there until you do the casting, meaning you only have so many resources to get spells. Now, when you take the casting action, you're going to cast all spells you have. You don't pick and choose. You're pretty much just unloading everything, like any good mage would. Now, most of these spells, you provide either some form of ruin or restore. These are the points you need to buy your heroic actions. You can see, for example, this card needs you to accumulate at least 15 ruin or 20 restore. The reason there's an or is they actually cancel each other out. So, for example, let's say I was able to make 20 ruin, which would be available to buy that, but I also made 10 restore. In the end, I actually only have 10 ruin, so I would not be able to purchase this card. So it's all about trying to really go all in on one or the other. However, if you're able to actually hit net zero, so an equal amount of ruin and restore, you have reached equilibrium. In which case, you look at this chart over here, depending on what your equilibrium was, if it was 6 and 6 or 10 and 10, you actually get more ruin and restore, as well as a bonus. First person there gets a prestige and 2 crystals, but there are more acuity you can earn every time you do equilibrium, because it is difficult. There are a couple other weird spells I want to go over first really fast. These are your simple ones. They give the bonus up here. There are also some like this. This is a link spell. Pretty much it will power up another one. Like, for example, this, it would double what you earn from that. So that's a great way to get a lot of points if you need to. There's also enchantments, which can pretty much affect the entire grouping of spells instead of just one. This one, for example, turns all restore into ruin. So that's a way you can just make sure you get all the points you need. There is also one unique element here, this yellow symbol. When you have a spell like this that has that yellow star and a number in yellow, pretty much if you have this on a card or in your dice pool, you get a powered up version. So that's really something good to have around. And you only need one for all of them. So you don't need to have one for each spell. That makes it so you have one, you can pretty much do a super version. You're going to spend these spells on the heroics. They have, of course, the costs I mentioned before. They also have a sigil in the top corner. Some of them don't, some might have 2. These sigils are important because not only do they help with endgame scoring, but you may have noticed that some of these cards here have those sigils. So for example, this card, for every green sigil you have, you get an additional acuity when you take and use it, meaning you can power up your other cards as well. Of course, they're worth victory points as well. That's what you really want them for. Now, before we get to endgame scoring, I want to quickly talk about the Arcanas over here. You may have noticed these cool creatures. They're sort of bonuses if you're able to cast your spell in a certain way. So, for example, this guy here, if you're able to cast a spell that has water, lightning, and earth element, you take this card. And at the end of the game, for every spell you cast, every 2 water spells you've cast, you get a prestige point. So all the spells you cast earlier, like the heroic I took, they actually all stack and you keep on standby because those things, you may get more victory points. If someone has purchased enough heroic cards, then you're going to make sure everyone has equal number of turns, and then you're going to count up points. Most of the points are going to be very easy. They're going to come from this symbol here, which will come from heroic cards, from the prestige tokens over there, as well as earning them from your arcanas that you've been able to collect. But there is another way for you to earn points, and that goes back to the sigils on these heroic cards. There is a bit of a set collection, so for every 2 you have, you'll earn some points. About 2 points. By every 3 you have, you'll earn 5 points. So you don't just want to buy cards with high value sometimes. You want to look at those sets as well, not just to power up your cards, but to also get that extra push you need at the end of the game. That is the game. It's all about showing off your prestige of like slowly changing the elements and gathering up and prepping spells before you cast this huge turn, whether it be to just go all in on something to get these cool heroics, or if you're clever enough, hit that equilibrium mark to get some of the rewards over there, which it feels very rewarding when you're like, all right, if I did this, I can do this one more thing to get that 1 extra point, which brings me to equilibrium.
Yeah, and you have to say it in that way with your pitch getting
exactly.
higher
Oh, absolutely.
Gradually. Yeah, you got basically keeping your eye on the prize, which is these cards. And by the way, I don't know if it was clear. These are the victory points. That's how many points they're worth. And then these are like your way to work up. So there's essentially a basic order, a structure to how the game goes is like buy these cards to help you buy those cards to buy these cards.
Yes.
Which it's kind of, you have a nice guiding through line in the game. There's a way to do things, but there is some wiggle room in between there where you might not be directly at the same pace as the other players, because you could decide, I'm going to take my cards back early because there's one that I really liked in there, or you might just keep taking and playing, taking, and playing and not bring cards back into your hand as frequently. It depends on what you're getting, but maybe you're really happy with the types of conversions you have available to you, or maybe you just keep rolling what you need. That could change up. And yeah, deciding whether you want to go for ruin or restore based on what spells are available to you, or like you said, going for that equilibrium, which does take a little more thinking power, but it also can be a nice kind of plan B, just in case there might not be, maybe you started with a couple of restore cards and right now only things you see are ruin. You kind of might have to shift to that strategy.
Right. And by the way, each character has their own little board. They're sort of unique for each character of like, generally just any leftover die you haven't played get converted into restore ruin, as well as you can choose to spend some acuity there. So that might be like if you need that extra 1 or 2 for either, whether it's to hit equilibrium or if you just you have 10 and you want this one instead of that, and you can get that 1 extra point.
Right. Yeah. So that is a little something at the end where it's like, oh, I'm 1 away or whatever. You do have some recourse, especially if you plan ahead and save these. Probably, usually, at least for like your first few games, you're going to be using all your dice, but you might, like, again, especially these symbols, you'll probably be saving if you have a card that it's important for.
Now, I do want to point out there is a solo mode for you to play with, and as well, they have some more basic version. You can avoid using their arcanas, as well as the other side of these boards have a more basic one. So if you want everyone to be unique and not unique, the same, and don't want to deal with the uniqueness, you can go with that. That's perfectly a fine option. It doesn't really change the rules that much because it's just you all have the same dice and stuff. You don't have to worry about the weirder items there. Right. But the artifacts, I do like. This is a unique card you just start the game with. So everyone has their own weird item. One person gets 2. So you do get a pretty good starting point. Like this is a way to just get 5 or 2 extra, which is pretty nice.
Right. You have to have 3 initially, but if you do, you can trade them in for 5. So yeah, you net 2 at the end. So yeah, an interesting little unique twist that you have. So yeah, everybody will have a totally different engine going on. There's no like direct attacking in this game or anything like that. No. Of course, you could maybe try to take a card you think somebody else wants, but I think 9 times out of 10, that's going to be hard to discern and probably not worth it for you. So it's in that sense, it's somewhat of a friendly game, even though you are, of course, competing for points.
Yeah, it's really all about trying to collect and start your engine going. In particular, for each turn, you're pretty much rebooting your engine, your spells to get these, and it's really a numbers game there. I think that's where the fun is, just like when tweaking your spells again, especially if they hit equilibrium, or like even if you're not hitting equilibrium, if you found a way to like just hit 23 because you're like. Because sometimes it might not be you can do that, but then someone bought a spell, the next card flips over, and you're like, oh, that just gives 10.
Right.
That's exactly what I needed.
Yeah, I know you said that this kind of reminded you, for anyone just for a point of comparison, the game Call to Adventure. I also kind of get kind of a Splendor sort of vibe from it in the way that you're like working your way progressively up to the more expensive cards and building an engine sort of.
Right.
So I think if you like that sort of game where it's about collecting resources and getting like an engine of cards that will make you stronger, faster, then this is something that maybe you want to take a look at.
Of course, you can check out the Kickstarter right now. Will be the link down in the description. So in case there's anything else, like we said, as always with the previews, these are prototypes. There could be more stretch goals, more rules, cards. Let us know if you think any of those are interesting as well in the comments down below.
Yeah, talk to us. Let us know if you're going to back this one. It's called Mercurial. It's on Kickstarter right now. And this has been our preview. My name is Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was Roll for Crit. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to our channel, or if you really like us, you can support us on Patreon. Become a high roller today for exclusive bonus content. We also have a podcast now. You can check that out at rollforcrit.com/podcast. Weekly episodes with special guests you definitely want to listen to.